Welcome to the Ripple Effect Martial Arts Podcast. I am really excited to have with us today Mr. Joel Thompson. He's one of the newest instructors at Ripple Effect Martial Arts, and really excited to talk to you today. Thanks, Mr. Thompson.
Of course, thank you.
How did you begin training in the martial arts?
Yeah, so I started about 2005. I was 5 years old. Me and my mom started at Mile High Karate in Thornton, Colorado.
Okay.
And that was mainly because, like most kids, I was starting to show like signs of not being the most productive, not like having the most focus, stuff like that. So pretty common. And basically from like my first few classes, I was already hooked and I wanted to be an instructor. Like that was like my first like thought with it. I wasn't quite good yet, if I'm being honest. Like I didn't really start developing into what I think of as a good martial artist until way later down the line, but that was the start of it for sure. It's been like a constant thing that I've wanted to do.
It's really interesting what you said about being 5 years old, and that's a very mature perspective for you to reflect on, being five and going, maybe I didn't have enough focus or discipline, or maybe I wasn't quite that good yet, but still you had that goal. What did that feel like to be like, I want to be one of these instructors?
Yeah, I mean, I gave a talk about positive self-direction yesterday.
Okay.
And that was like one of the first things that was a goal for me that I can like very vividly remember and like refer back to. That's almost been a guiding light for me in everything I do. And I think it was just like that this person can make me have like a lot of fun, but also like teach me more than just these these like skills like that.
You gave a mat chat on positive self-direction.
Yes, sir.
Can you just summarize that for people listening that might not be familiar with that concept? What does positive self-direction mean?
Yeah, so to me, it's you always have kind of that like signal that you're following, that flare that you're following. It might not be exact, you might not get to the exact coordinates that you were looking for, but you will get like there, and you will get to like that kind of like place that you want. The way I'm looking at it now is it started out, I want to be a martial arts instructor. And that evolved into me being a teacher of all kinds. Realistically, I want to teach martial arts for the rest of my life, and English. And when I get better at music, all these things. I think teaching has become like a really big signal for me, like a flare for me almost. That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It's another word for it that flashes to me is beacon.
Yeah.
And I haven't been so great at that in my life. And I remember feeling that very strongly. I started way later than five.
Yeah.
I started when I was 41, but the black belt beacon, that was the goal. That was the direction. And you're going to get there. And I think as a way of keeping kids, especially from wandering too much, kids wander, and it's kind of a beautiful thing, but the direction, so you don't stray off course. Tell me a little bit what it was like when you actually did begin to instruct, even as a student. Your first experiences instructing, what was that like?
So I was 12. I just got my second degree black belt. And that was like a really big peak for me. And like for a long time before then, like, but even before my black belt, I would say like around high brown, that's when I started like this upward spiral, what everyone kind of feels like when they're going through prep cycle, conditional, all of those. But second degree was a peak for me when I realized who I was, or like who I'd become almost. Like I was still 12 and I was still like, not fully aware, but like I knew what I had done, what I wanted to do still. And that was like super, super important to me. And I feel like that reignited my initial passion of wanting to teach this. I'm going to start taking teaching classes. I'm going to do these things. And I think that's super awesome. One thing that I'm like reconciling with almost is trying to unlearn those behaviors that I got when I was 12 as like a teacher, which aren't bad, but like we have to constantly be becoming like a better example of that teacher almost.
Yeah. Develop. Do you feel
Yeah,
like further training in the martial arts has helped that develop your leadership ability?
definitely. So I trained for 2 years after I got my third degree. So I was 17. And then senior year of high school hit and I was student body president. I was super busy applying to colleges. So I just kind of hunkered down and focused. Didn't train as much, but my education is around teaching. I know more effective teaching through education teaching, like, and I know how to learn a new skill again,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is super important because when you start when you're 5, like this, all martial arts is like a second nature to me. So I feel like I almost had to do something new to be able to teach it again, if that makes sense.
It does. I think that it's a maybe a broad misconception that the idea of black belt is this narrowed focus that you become a black belt to become a great fighter or something. When in reality, it's a broadening. You become a black belt so that you're capable of doing anything that you want. The
Exactly.
discipline that is bred into that training and accomplishment, the confidence, the leadership skills, and that's what I hear you speaking to. Tell me a little bit, just a little bit of a sidetrack. What kind of drum kit do you play?
So right now I have Dixon Cornerstone. They're kind of a smaller brand,
Wow,
but
yeah, never heard of them.
it's this turquoise kit that's like super pretty. Um,
Five
it
piece or seven piece or
so it's snare, 2 toms floor, and then a ride, 2 crashes. And
man,
so it's pretty fun, yeah. So that was like me, my parents like pitching in for something I wanted. Because like the whole time through Christmas and everything else, like what I was getting was, I want this martial arts weapon. I need sparring gear. I want like a wave master, like, and I couldn't get out of that like kind of shell for a bit. And then when I stopped, there was nothing. So drum kit's nice. I love it.
to bring it back for everybody listening, the reason that I'm talking to Mr. Thompson, karate instructor, about drums and music is because I'm a musician too, and earning a black belt has enhanced my musicianship. And it's not something I necessarily thought would happen, but it's made me a more confident stage performer and a more confident composer. And it's just really made me a better musician. So it's interesting to talk to you about developing, your
Yeah. It's almost the inverse for me of that, where
really?
because of my martial arts ability, I could get the drum and I could get that extra skill and I could like learn it myself almost. Like because I have like had taught myself for so long and had learned this like really hard craft
Mhm.
over and over and over again, I was able to sit myself down at a kit and for a year just teach myself and get to a place where I'm really proud of myself for doing it in a year. Obviously, like I'm still breaching intermediate, but I've done that a year without much help. And that's like impressive to me. And I wouldn't have been able to do that without the time and commitment I had put into mastering my body and my mind through martial arts.
Am I stretching to say that the kind of things that you learned, let's say in prep cycle,
Yeah.
as coming together with a team, do you relate any of that to your ability to come together with other musicians and collaborate?
Yeah, definitely. I always use the example of sparring and fighting. I think although it's important and a big part in one of my favorite things, it's obviously not everything in martial arts. But one thing about sparring is that human connection. Um, I think that's the best way to learn about someone is if you spar them, because you're putting each other in harm's way to get better at something. You're being vulnerable for each other, you know.
Right.
I think, and this is like kind of a connection I've been making myself, is like language, music, martial arts. For me, they all have like super deep roots and connections, and I think that martial arts is a language that we share. Like, even if two people don't speak the same language, haven't met before, even if you spar, if you train together, by the end you're going to be hugging each other. You know, you're going to be like, that was awesome, that was a good sparring match. Like, that, where else do you find that? Kind of connecting it back to martial arts, I was like, oh, this is the same thing as all of us like working together on prep cycle during a sparring match, like when, you know, we're all showing each other new moves, a new form. Like, that's what this is. I just have to find the connections there.
The connection element is super interesting to me. I love to spar too. And for me, learning the combinations and the way that we learn those and practice those is on the mat in front of the mirror, generally without
the rudiments.
Exactly. And then when you put it, when another person is in front of you and you exercise those combinations and the reactions and the counters with another person, you get a real sense of how they work, and
Yeah,
the gears kind of come together.
exactly.
There's a tournament coming up, and I wonder, what's your experience? Do you remember your first tournament?
Yes, actually I do. That's like pulling some memories out. uh, I was like 6 or 7. It was a mile high karate tournament, so it would be like the size of our pre-COVID Mile High Karate Ripple Effect, or even the CMA A ones.
Right.
Um, it was scary. It was really scary for me. I still get like, I struggle with anxiety in general, and like some days before teaching classes, I'm nervous, like as all get up. When I was really young, I would cry at the slightest drop of like pressure and anxiety. So like my first tournament, as soon as I said judges and like went to position, I like started crying. And I had to like get through it. I still ended up getting 3rd place. I think I did with a D, but yeah, I think I did Dosan. I got 3rd place, but I was crying the whole time.
When that happened, you went up, did your presentation, and started crying. What happened? What did the judges say, or instructors here? What happened?
So I think the culture in the mid 2000s in a martial arts school is a little bit different than ripple effects now, and how I like to run my school, my classes. It was definitely more harsh. And when I first started, it was more fewer. So it was more like instructors that were very strict. Like, I need you to not be crying. If you're crying, we cannot like continue. That made me like not cry less, but it made me go through it. Even if it was like tons and tons of tears, didn't hesitate me at all. And that's a skill that like I really admire and really needed, I think.
It was a little bit of tough love and a little bit of encouragement.
Definitely. It's what I needed.
Let's put you in that situation of the instructor. If a student at a tournament, or even in tournament prep in the schools, if they broke down and they couldn't do their presentation, what's something that you might do or say?
This is something that I've been learning about in my education classes, is this idea of a warm enforcer, right? So you have this line that you want, and this is how parents should kind of operate too, although it's a little bit different because, you know, it's a parent's, not, I wouldn't say parent student, but parent child relationship instead of teacher student. But I have this line that I need you to meet no matter what. And that line's going to be a little bit different for every student. So let's say younger Joel me, right? I'm his instructor. I know younger Joel cries, so his line is different than another student who doesn't cry, right? Like his line for me, I'm gonna have a slightly lower standard so that when he meets it, I can push it back up. Specifically, I would give them a chance to reset themselves, tell them to focus on, when you turn around to tie everything, maybe even sit with them there before they go out. I would get them away, give them their second, and see what they can do afterwards. And I think that's the best thing that you can do for a student.
That's really interesting that you talk about the different lines that you need them to meet, because I've heard instructors talk that way about black belts. So when you see earning your black belt, so there are standards that everyone needs to meet, right? That you can't go, well, I don't know my nunchuck form,
No.
but can I still get my black belt? That doesn't work. But the effort that's put in, that's another standard that everyone needs to meet, but instructors have to judge that. But does this effort meet your potential? And how do you do that with those upper level students, even when they're young?
I think to really get that line well established, you need a strong relationship with the students. But with a little 5-year-old, if you can make a good impression, you're already starting that relationship. And the way one of my teachers talks about it is like a piggy bank. So every student, you almost think about of them having their own piggy bank on their little square, their desk, etc. Every interaction you do is filling up their piggy bank. And so then when you want them to do more, go past their line, when you need them to correct back to their line, you're withdrawing from that piggy bank for that student, right? And you putting it in is, how was your day? How's school going? Tell me about your favorite subject. What instruments do you play? It's anything. I like to be asked about who I am, what I'm doing outside of martial arts. I know a little 8-year-old that's going to school and loving what they're learning is going to want to be asked that too. My main instructor that I had for the longest time is Master Kyle Galloway, who we, as Ripple Effect, we interact with pretty regularly. He's an amazing martial artist. I look up to him all the time, and it was almost like natural. It wasn't forced. I think he's someone that's really almost like scary charismatic, which I admire because I think that's a valuable trait. But yeah, it's like when you're like with him, you're like, this man's awesome. When you kind of step away, you're like, he can convince anyone of anything if he wanted to. Because even now, I'm referring back to him. What would Master Galloway do in this moment, right?
That's an interesting connection to martial arts hundreds of years ago. I mean, the Lord and the samurai, that kind of relationship is different, obviously now, but
Yeah.
That reflection on what would my teacher do?
That thought almost makes me. I've trained under Master Galloway, so that's why when I wanted to join Ripple Effect, the transition was so easy because Galloway and Macy are so close together, right? They're almost related. If you think about like lineage, all the stuff they grew up together.
Right.
Because of that relationship I have with him, I'm not only a better teacher, but I am trusted, which is super interesting, I think.
Right. Yeah. That lineage is really strong. And for anybody listening, that the lineage begins with Grandmaster Jhoon Rhee and extends to Grandmaster Jeff Smith, who's a 10th degree black belt under Jhoon Rhee, to Grandmaster Stephen Oliver, a 9th degree black belt under Jhoon Rhee and Jeff Smith. And then our master instructor, Greg Macy, a 5th degree black belt under Jeff Smith and Grandmaster Stephen Oliver. So it's kind of amazing how that lineage continues, beginning in South Korea in the 50s and coming to the US. But now we have 20-year-old Joel Thompson
Yes,
continuing the lineage. Do you have any martial arts heroes like in the movies, in books, in manga, stuff like that?
so obviously Bruce Lee, just because every martial artist worships him for good reason. I think it's really interesting the connection between Jhoon Rhee, Bruce Lee, and Muhammad Ali. If you don't know about that one, it's the order of it is always kind of confused, and I'm not sure about the exact one, but what I believe it is Jhoon Rhee worked with Bruce Lee, and they kind of together developed this a faster way to do a back fist, basically the fastest punch ever recorded. So Jhoon Rhee, Bruce Lee mastermind this amazing way to punch faster, human body, martial arts experience. Jhoon Rhee then takes it to Muhammad Ali, and Muhammad Ali gets his amazing jab that ends up being his like defensive backbone for most of his fights in that time of his career. That connection right there, like who would even think that Muhammad Ali and Bruce Lee were connected if you weren't in the martial arts world? Those pictures of Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris, Jhoon Rhee, Jeff Smith, John Chung, that was all over our walls in my martial arts schools at Success. And Jeff Smith is the first kickboxing world champion in the world, and we still get to train with him.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to everybody. Thank you for instructing. Everybody come to the Fort Collins School to take a class with Mr. Thompson, and we'll see you at the tournament too.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for listening to the Ripple Effect Martial Arts Podcast. Find episodes and more at rippleeffectmartialarts.com.